The Justin Bieber untold story. Before the arenas. Before the record deals. Before the world knew his name, there was a kid in a small Canadian city, raised by a single mom who worked multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. He wasn't born into fame. He was born into hardship, and he sang his way out of it. But nobody tells you what's waiting on the other side of that dream. This is the story of how pain became fame, and how fame eventually became its own kind of pain. Justin Bieber was born in London, Ontario in 1994 to teenage parents who weren't together by the time he was a toddler. His mother, Patty Millett, raised him largely on her own in Stratford, a small town a couple hours outside Toronto. Money was tight. They moved between low-income housing, and Patty has spoken openly in later years about how difficult, and at times how dark, those early years were for her, as a young single mother trying to hold everything together. His father was in and out of his life in those early years. What Justin had, consistently, was his mother, his grandparents, and music. He taught himself to play the drums on pots and pans before he ever owned a real kit. He picked up guitar, piano, and trumpet on his own, mostly by ear. Music wasn't a hobby chosen from comfort, it was something closer to survival. A way for a kid with very little stability to feel like he had something that was entirely his. When Patty started posting videos of her son singing on YouTube, it wasn't a career move. It was a mother sharing something with relatives who lived too far away to watch him grow up in person. Raised by a single teenage mother, self-taught musician, no industry connections, just talent and a camera. Those home videos didn't stay small for long. A talent manager named Scooter Braun stumbled onto one of them by accident, searching for something else entirely, and couldn't stop watching. He tracked down a phone number, called Justin's school, and eventually flew a 12-year-old and his mother out to Atlanta to meet him. From there, things moved almost impossibly fast. Braun introduced Justin to Usher, who became both a mentor and, soon after, a business partner. By the time Justin Bieber was 15 years old, he had a record deal with a major label. Think about that for a second. At an age when most kids are worrying about middle school, Justin Bieber had already signed a contract that would define the rest of his life, before he'd had the chance to fully become who he was. Discovered on YouTube at 12, signed to a major label at 15. What happened next became a cultural phenomenon that even the music industry wasn't fully prepared for. His debut single hit airwaves in 2009, and by 2010, Baby had turned him into arguably the most famous teenager on the planet. The scale of it was staggering. Arenas sold out in minutes. Airports had to be shut down when word spread that he'd landed. Girls camped outside hotels overnight. The media gave it a name: Bieber Fever, as if it were a genuine spreading epidemic. In a way, it was. By 18, he had multiple #1 albums, a growing acting and business empire, and a social media following larger than almost anyone else alive. He was, by nearly every external measure, one of the most successful people on Earth. But success at that scale comes with a hidden bill. Most people get their teenage years and early 20s to make mistakes privately, to be awkward, to mess up, to figure out who they are without an audience. Justin Bieber didn't get that. Every version of him, the good nights and the bad ones, played out in front of hundreds of millions of people. By 18, multiple albums, hundreds of millions of followers, almost no privacy. Around 2013 and 2014, the story the world was telling about Justin Bieber began to change. The headlines shifted from talent to trouble. A string of legal issues, a widely mocked deposition video, an egging incident at a neighbor's house, a DUI arrest, controversial remarks abroad that drew international backlash. A public opinion poll around this time named him one of the most disliked celebrities in America. What rarely made the headlines was the person underneath all of it. In interviews years later, Bieber has described this period candidly as a time of deep isolation, resentment toward an industry that had built him up as a product before he was old enough to consent to it, and a growing reliance on substances to cope with a level of scrutiny almost no one his age has ever had to survive. He's talked about feeling like people were profiting off a version of him that had stopped feeling like a real person, a brand to be managed, rather than a young man trying to figure out his life. There's a pattern that shows up again and again in stories like this. The more famous someone becomes, the fewer people around them feel safe telling them the truth. Bieber was surrounded by more people than almost anyone on the planet, and by his own account, felt more alone than ever. Fame without privacy. Success without space to grow up. Isolation disguised as a crowd. By the mid-2000s, Bieber had largely stepped back from the spotlight, not by strategy, but by necessity. He's since described this stretch as the lowest point of his life. Depression, disconnection from the people who loved him most, and a public image so damaged that he genuinely questioned whether he wanted to keep making music at all. In 2020, he released a documentary series called Justin Bieber, Seasons, where he opened up about health struggles that had gone undiagnosed for years, including Lyme disease and a related case of chronic mono, both of which had been quietly draining his energy and mental health, while the public assumed he was simply acting out. This is the part of the fame and struggle story that gets skipped over the most. Not the scandal, but the exhaustion that follows it. The moment a person has to decide whether to keep performing a version of themselves for the world, or step back, disappoint some people, and try to become someone real again. Bieber chose to step back. 2020 reveals years of undiagnosed illness. I was not just being a bad kid. I was really unhealthy. What followed wasn't a dramatic comeback moment. It was slower and messier than that, which is usually what real healing actually looks like. Bieber has spoken openly about leaning on his faith community during this period, about starting therapy, and about doing the unglamorous work of repairing relationships he damaged, including with his own family. In 2018, he married model Hailey Baldwin. The same tabloids that once profited from his chaos slowly began covering something different. A young man trying to build a stable, private life in public, which is its own kind of difficult. His music changed with him. Albums like Purpose, Changes, and Justice traded the bravado of his teenage stardom for something more reflective. Songs about faith, marriage, mental health, and forgiveness, both asking for it and trying to offer it to himself. Then, in 2022, right in the middle of touring behind Justice, his body forced another reckoning. He was diagnosed with Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, a condition that left half of his face partially paralyzed. He posted a video showing it directly to fans, unable to fully smile or blink on one side, and cancelled the remainder of his tour to focus on recovery. It was, in its own way, a brutal kind of honesty. No filter, no publicist smoothing it over. Just a global superstar showing the world exactly what his body and years of pressure had done to him. 2018, marries Hailey Baldwin. 2022, diagnosed with Ramsay-Hunt syndrome mid-tour. Chooses recovery over the spotlight. For a few years after that, Bieber largely disappeared from major public performances, focusing on his family, his health, and quietly parting ways with Scooter Braun, the manager who had discovered him as a child and guided nearly every chapter of his career since. Then in 2025, he returned with a different kind of album, Swag, followed by Swag 2, stripped down, personal, and unmistakably made by someone no longer performing perfection. The response was enormous. Swag earned him 4 Grammy nominations, including Album of the Year, and in early 2026, he performed at the Grammys for the first time in 4 years. Weeks later, he headlined Coachella, nicknamed Bieberchella by fans online, delivering a stripped-back, no dancers, no pyrotechnics set that felt less like a spectacle and more like a man simply standing on a stage, playing the songs that built and broke and rebuilt his life, sometimes pulling up his own old music videos for the crowd to sing along to. By the summer of 2026, he was announced as a co-headliner of the World Cup final halftime show, sharing the stage with artists like Madonna and Shakira, in front of one of the largest television audiences in the world. It wasn't the loud, chaotic comeback the tabloids once might have written about him. It was quieter than that, steadier. A man in his 30s, still finding his footing in public, still occasionally stumbling, but doing it now on his own terms. 2026. 4 Grammy nominations. Coachella headliner. World Cup final halftime performer. Still healing in public, on his own terms. Justin Bieber's story isn't remarkable because he's a celebrity. It's remarkable because we got to watch nearly all of it. The poverty, the discovery, the meteoric rise, the very public collapse, the illness nobody could see, and the slow, unglamorous work of putting himself back together, in real time, with the entire world commenting along the way. Strip away the fame, and what's left is a familiar story. A kid who grew up without much, found something he was good at, lost himself somewhere in the middle of getting everything he ever wanted, and had to fight, quietly, imperfectly, more than once, to find his way back to himself. Maybe that's the real lesson buried in stories like his. Fame doesn't erase pain. Sometimes it just delays it, amplifies it, and broadcasts it to an audience of millions. What matters isn't whether someone falls, it's whether they find a way to stand back up, and whether, this time, they let themselves do it slowly.